Welcome to the We Inspire Futures podcasting project. I'm your host, JL. I'm very pleased to bring you a conversation with visionary educators Mali Bickley and Jim Carleton. Listen as Mali and Jim explain the concept of balanced digital literacy in teacher and administrator professional development sessions. We'll talk about the Lord of the Eflies and how important it is to add a shared component to our practice.
I guess our advice is to start introducing yourself to people, and the community sort of is supportive of one another. So once no matter how you meet people through either iEARN or your Twitter or somebody who's following your blog or whatever, start working together and reaching out, using some of those social networking tools that you're comfortable with, and starting a really small idea, and then it can grow from there, because once your network starts to build, it just gets wider and broader and deeper.
Yeah, I think you need to just choose something and get started, because once you do start, then the whole thing starts to go very organically. And if you wait until you think everything is perfect and I've got the perfect project and now I'm all ready to do it and I know how to do it, you'll just never get started.
Elaborate on the Lord of the Eflies kind of idea, and tell me if you think it's come any further in the last few years.
That was something that we referred to, especially when all of these Web 2.0 technologies first came out, where, the first phase of the internet was the read internet. Second phase comes along, it's the read and write internet. And now virtually anybody can publish text, images, video, really easy to communicate, collaborate, and share. And so for most school boards, school districts around the world, really, their immediate reaction was just lock all these things down. And that's why it was like, for us, it was like Lord of the Eflies, because the students were still going home and using all these tools. So they're still posting to YouTube. They're still on social networking sites like MySpace and Facebook, and they're still blogging, and they're still doing all this stuff. But they didn't have adults, just like in Lord of the Flies. There was nobody there to help guide them. There was nobody there to help them to use these tools safely, respectfully, responsibly, and meaningfully. Infrastructure-wise and technology-wise, it's getting much better. But I think in terms of professional development and teaching, I think we still have a long way to go. A lot of the time people would say, well, don't worry, the young teachers are going to change all of this. But that hasn't been, in my perception and a lot of other people's perception, it hasn't been the case, because even though they've got the skills, they might be using these tools themselves. They didn't grow up in an education system that was about facilitating projects, that was more about project-based learning. And so they're the ones that have the knowledge that are disseminating the knowledge down to others. So the teaching part has a long way to go, I think. But infrastructure-wise and access to technology, I think, has changed quite a bit. What we think is key, it's just like any other literacy, whether it's traditional, quote unquote, traditional literacies or digital literacies. It's that whole sort of, we'll call it like balanced digital literacy. So it's just that whole gradual release of responsibility. So not only do you have to model it for people and show them what's possible, the next phase is crucial, and I think it's the one that we tend to miss as educators a lot, is that sort of shared phase where you're now connected, where you have a coach, a coach who's proficient in using these technologies and integrating them into the curriculum, and they're there with you, co-planning and co-teaching, debriefing together, and so you have that shared phase, and I think that's often missed. And I think when that's there, then you can get to that guided phase where somebody's doing projects on their own, and there's just somebody there to sort of give them a hand from time to time, and eventually then they can do it independently. But I think the critical piece, and the piece that we quite often miss professional development-wise, is that shared piece.
What could an instructional leader do to help their staff and to support their staff in taking these critical steps?
It's allowing their teachers the choice of what they want to experiment with in their classroom. It's not the administrator coming back from a workshop and saying, okay, thou shalt do voice threads. It's providing the teachers with the choice, the same way that we want to differentiate the experience for our kids. We want our teachers to be doing that too, and whatever they feel comfortable and with whatever that they want to jump in with. So letting them have that freedom to make those decisions for their students as well.
When the environment the professional development is set up in a way that just fosters all of that, They are. They're going to be engaged in their learning so much more than if somebody was standing at the front of the room talking to them all day long about what it should look like. And then what ends up happening, if you're like me, I'm probably, on my phone or on my laptop or something doing other things because I've already checked out and I'm not engaged.
And I think the biggest aha moment that we've seen in our staff, that it wasn't about the tool, it was about how it was going to showcase the student learning and how it was going to develop relationships with others. And that was huge. And it was great to see that a lot of the teachers actually had that moment when we were sitting there with them. And it was really exciting to see that come around. And the biggest reason that was able to happen is because we had a really supportive administrator behind us.
It's not about just taking these technologies and applying them on top of a 20th century learning model. It's about co-learning and facilitating learning. It's about being the guide on the side and all that kind of stuff. But now these technologies really allow that to happen in a way that, prior to this, it wasn't possible. And so I think people, there's that awareness that it needs to change, but there's a real reluctance to do so because they feel, okay, there's always that, okay, but I've got this huge curriculum and I have to get through it. Now, how am I going to get through all of these expectations in the curriculum if I'm doing this big project? And they feel overwhelmed by that need to cover every one of those expectations. And so they end up, in my mind, in a lot of cases, teaching the curriculum rather than the students. You know what I mean? Like, it ends up being, okay, well, I covered all that stuff versus what did your students really learn? You know what I mean? So
right, and it's that part too speaks to the assessment that. Right. In this kind of learning, the assessment looks completely different for every student, and sometimes teachers aren't ready to take the assessment to make it look completely different than the pencil paper task, and so it is taking a risk, and it's also explaining to the parents why, and your administrator, why your assessment looks completely different. And we all talk about differentiated instruction and differentiated assessment, but when it comes down to it, those tests and the data that they look at, they come from pencil paper tasks. So it's being able to step out of that box and go that route. But I know for me, and I know for Jim too personally, it changed. It gave us a brand new passion for teaching again, and it gave us a purpose, and it changed everything for us.
Because what we'll say to people too is, like, we're not going to lie to you. When you do this stuff, it's going to take more energy. It's going to take more energy because it's much more organic and fluid, and you don't always know where the project's going to go. Takes more energy, but it is so much more energizing. You just get so much more back from the students that it's invigorating. And I think, like Mali was saying, for both of us, we're at a point in our teaching career before we got involved in this where both of us were contemplating moving on with our careers because we'd lost that passion for teaching. And it was through not even so much the technology, it was through collaborating and working with others that reinvigorated certainly mine and I know Mali's passion for teaching again.
What's in store? What's your next step?
The only thing I know for sure is, let's say 5 years from now, I'll probably be doing something that there's no way that I could even anticipate right now. As long as we just keep on working at this and just trust and keep the connections going, and something always seems to, like we said, happen sort of organically. One thing leads to another, and the next thing you know, we'll be involved in some sort of a project that we can't even anticipate right now, which to I think for both of us is it's exciting. It's because then for sure, whatever we're doing, we'll be learning something new as we're trying to teach it to others.
Thank you for listening. Mali and Jim continue to make a difference in the classroom, at the board level, and through global projects. What are your thoughts about effective professional development for administrators and teachers? How does your administration support your efforts with technology as a tool for connections?